Alex Lowe was one of the greatest climbers of all time, bold, driven, and obsessed with the mountains. But in 1999, an avalanche took his life. Decades later, the ice gave him back, and suddenly, the past came crashing in. This is the story of Alex Lowe. Alex Lowe was born on December 24, 1958 in Missoula, Montana, the middle of three boys. His father taught at the University of Montana and his mother taught elementary school. Growing up in that household meant ideas and learning on one side and discipline and guidance on another. Alex's real classroom was always outside. He was a kid who never could sit still. He climbed trees, cliffs, rooftops, anything that he could scramble up. It wasn't caution that defined him, it was raw energy. He needed movement like other people needed air. Even as a kid, that constant motion felt like freedom, but later it would come at a cost. He wasn't a standout in team sports. He later joked that he was actually the last picked for sports, but he thrived in the wild. As a teen, he earned his Eagle Scout badge, which fit the direction that his life was already going. Longer days outside, learning skills, and pushing himself. Alex wasn't built for stillness. Even before climbing found him, he was already wired for movement and pressure. His father expected discipline and results and could be pretty critical of Alex. And that shaped Alex in lasting ways. If he wasn't in motion, if he wasn't achieving something, the self-doubt crept in. By high school, he found climbing. And that discovery was less like stumbling on a new hobby and more like recognizing who he'd been all along. It was really an awakening for him. He started putting up first ascents in the mountains in Montana, and that was early proof that this was not just a hobby or a passing phase. It was going to be his life. Mountains were just thrilling for Alex. They were sacred. He once called them cathedrals without roofs. And climbing wasn't about rebellion for him. It was about purpose. It gave him the outlet he'd always been searching for and a way to burn off that restless energy that he had. He had found the thing that made him feel most alive. And once Alex zeroed in on something, there was no halfway. Jenni was about 20 when she first met Alex. She was barely out of high school. She was at a bike shop in Boulder when she noticed him, this tall, lanky teenager with wild hair, wide shoulders, and a kind of restless energy that just filled the room the moment he walked into it. Alex was just 17, but there was something just magnetic about him, and she felt it instantly. At first, Jenni thought the relationship might just be a fun fling, an adventurous detour before life pulled them in different directions, but Alex poured himself into everything, relationships included. He wrote her love notes, gave her flowers, and brought that same intense focus to dating that he brought to climbing. And Jenni got totally swept up in it. But she also quickly realized that this wasn't going to be a normal love story. Loving Alex meant keeping pace with a man who lived at full tilt, physically, emotionally, and relentlessly. And that intensity showed itself early. When Alex couldn't get his fix in the mountains, he grew moody and restless, and friends called him a caged animal. He could be funny, energetic, and full of life, but just as quickly he could turn volatile, as if all that internal pressure had nowhere else to go. He expected a lot of himself, and that perfection sometimes boiled over into frustration. His temper flared in ways that were hard to handle. There were times when Jenni actually thought about walking away, but she didn't. Because being with Alex meant being pulled into something electric. It was chaotic, yeah, but it was also deeply alive and fulfilling. And fun. For all the turbulence, he was thoughtful, he was generous, caring, and unshakably loyal. He saw beauty everywhere, and he made the people around him feel like life was something to be lived. And she just couldn't imagine walking away from him. And that's when things got even more serious. In 1982, Alex and Jenni got married in Montana. It wasn't a traditional beginning because this wasn't going to be a traditional life. Alex had tried to walk the normal path once in his life. He got an engineering scholarship, and for a while it seemed like he might settle into something stable. But the mountains were always there, and they kept calling him. He ended up going back to school after flunking out for math, and he was brilliant at it. He even brought math textbooks on differential equations to expeditions. Now, wouldn't that be fun, sharing a tent with the guy talking about math? Not your normal expedition, I don't think. But even that wasn't enough for him. Nothing was, except movement. If he wasn't physically pushing himself, Alex became restless, edgy, and hard to be around. And climbing didn't just give him joy, it gave him peace. It was like something he needed. And this is a really, really interesting part of this story. And I think a lot of people that we question, why did you go climb Mount Everest? Or why did you go do these crazy things that are dangerous and risking your life? And it's just because some people just can't help it. No matter what he tried, he just could not stop. It was a huge part of his life, and he needed it. Jenni kind of got caught up in that whirlwind as they were always on the move. They were going on expeditions in the Alps, Alaska, and Peru. They were spending months on the road and months away from any sense of normalcy. For her, it was pretty exhilarating at first, but it also brought moments of hard truth. In Europe, while they were descending a route, Jenni came face to face with the body of a dead climber, and it shook her. This was the first time she really felt the cost of the life that she was signing up for. Alex tried to comfort her that night, and they talked about risk and death and what it all meant. He told her that he'd rather die on a mountain than in a car wreck. But for Jenni, that moment lingered, and she couldn't unsee it. And that wasn't the last brush with mortality. Alex had his share of near misses. On one climb, he was nearly crushed in an ice fall, and on another, altitude sickness pushed him to the edge. But the worst of all was the fall in Alaska. 51 meters or 170 feet down the mountain after his crampon failed. It shattered his body and delayed their wedding. To Alex, it was a humiliating setback. He didn't like failing in the mountains. And to Jenni, it was a shock. When she confronted him, she asked him why he was trying to kill himself, and Alex promised to be more careful. But even as he said those words, they both knew that this is just who he was. The risks weren't going away. Jenni stayed with him not because she believed Alex would change, but because she accepted that this is who he was. For all the turbulence, the good outweighed the bad, even if it meant building a home around a man who could never stop chasing something just out of reach. When Alex returned to university as a math major after flunking out of engineering, professors admired his mind. He was focused, articulate, and really smart. But behind the scenes, he was fighting demons that they never saw. He would sit for hours spiraling in self-criticism, saying that I'm not really a great climber, and told Jenni more than once if only I was stronger. Other times, he confessed that he was afraid that people would find out he's mediocre. And that fear traced all the way back to his father. Alex always felt like he was failing him, never meeting his expectations, and no matter how hard he tried, it wasn't good enough. He grew up believing that he was a bad person, and that belief carved itself into the very way he lived. Climbing became his way of pushing back. Every new route, every summit was an attempt to outrun that doubt. And maybe it was kind of also a way of rewriting the script, of proving that he was more than that boy that his father dismissed. And that drive carried him to K2 in 1983. It was a 3-month-long expedition, grueling and brutal. Climbers died on the mountain, and Alex sent letters to Jenni. His mood was swinging from loneliness to awe, and he really missed her. Even amid the danger, though, he never questioned being there. What he did question was the style of climbing. It taught him something pretty important, that he didn't enjoy these big expedition-style climbs with fixed ropes and large teams. He wanted to move fast and light and free in the mountains, not dragging a circus up its side. He came home changed after that, but he didn't slow down. They stayed connected during long trips through letters. Later it was email, but the ritual was always the same. Alex would write to reassure Jenni and maybe even to calm his own nerves. He told her once that I always come home. Jenni challenged him though, saying, what if you die in the mountains? And he said, I won't, because to die would be to fail as a climber. Staying alive is the first rule. Besides, I have too much to live for. Jenni pressed him again and again, saying, what if he really didn't come back? And he just joked to her and said, well, then just throw me into a crevasse. So Jenni, who really loved him, tried to build a life around the way he was without losing herself in the process. And that tension between love and altitude, between home and summit, would define the years ahead. Dave Cheeseman and Catherine Freer, both vibrant, experienced climbers, were killed in an avalanche on Mount Logan in the Yukon. Catherine had been Jenni's friend back in Boulder, and she was the kind of woman who seemed to carry adventure in her bones. They ended up becoming really close, and news of their deaths hit hard. Jenni couldn't stop picturing it. Dave and Catherine vanishing into a blur of snow and ice, tumbling down the mountain. It was terrifying, not just in a distant, tragic way, but in a personal, what if this could be us kind of way. Alex tried to reassure her, saying that I'd never climb a mountain like that, way too much objective hazard. He hoped it would calm her down, but it didn't really help. Because the part that stuck with Jenni wasn't just the avalanche, it was what happened next. Dave's climbing partner and friend had been by Dave's wife's side in the months that followed his death. He was helping with the kids, stepping in and grieving with her. And over time, that grief turned into something else. They fell in love. Eventually, Dave's widow and his friend got married. Jenni and Alex spent time with them during a visit to Canada, and while Jenni admired them deeply, something about it unsettled her. The friend had been Dave's closest friend for a long time, and now he was raising Dave's children. She said they found love and comfort in each other, but fear knotted in my stomach whenever they recounted the shock of losing David. She couldn't stop thinking about what it would feel like to be his wife, to have your life shatter in an instant, to try and rebuild with the person who'd been beside your partner on the mountain. She said, I asked myself if I'd be as strong, and it was the first time she truly imagined a life without Alex. By 1988, Jenni was ready for a different kind of adventure. After nearly 7 years of life on the move, she wanted a family. She wanted to settle down. Alex was hesitant, though. He loved the freedom that they had, but Jenni waited, and in time, they began building their future together. That year, their first son, Max, was born, and Alex instantly adored him. But fatherhood didn't quiet the restlessness inside of him. If anything, it got worse. He loved holding his newborn, but he still longed for the mountains. For Jenni, though, motherhood was grounding. She stopped climbing pretty much after she had Max. But for Alex, it was more complicated. He summed it up in a letter that he wrote home, writing that he felt torn. His family on one side and his expeditions on the other. He said, when I'm home with you, I fantasize about being here. However, being here alone, I can't help feeling that I'm living a self-indulgent experience without 2/3 of who I am. You and Max. And the clock was ticking in Alex's mind. He kind of lived his life with urgency, as though he knew there wouldn't be enough time to climb everything, to love fully, and to reconcile the two halves of his life. By 1990, though, Alex tried to give normal life a chance. He excelled in graduate school, but the grind wore him down. Despite Jenni's pleas to finish his master's degree, he quit. A brief stint in the oil industry left him depressed. He said, my spirit is being sucked dry. And as somebody who has worked in the corporate world for decades and finally got out, I feel the same. My spirit is not being sucked dry anymore now that I'm out of it. And then he said, the light at the tunnel is so far away, but I've got you and Max to think of, and I can't quit. Jenni told him that they'd figure it out. And he was relieved to have her support because they both knew the truth that Alex wasn't built for the 9-to-5, like so many of us are not. Let me know, are you built for the 9-to-5? If you're in it, do you want out? Or do you like it? Some people like it. Some people thrive on that routine. That same year, opportunity knocked. David Brashears invited Alex to guide an Everest expedition. Everest had never been high on Alex's list. He dismissed it as more of a lottery than a test of skill. He said anyone fit enough and willing to take their chances can get up Everest. He preferred steep, technical walls where strength, technique, and judgment mattered. He joked that Everest was something he would climb when he was an old guy. But guiding on Everest meant credibility, income, and a level of recognition that few climbers reached. On October 4th, 1990, Alex Lowe became the 40th American to summit Mount Everest. When other teams had packed it in, convinced the mountain was closed for the year, Alex broke trail leading through the deep snow, leading the push to the roof of the world. He even saved someone's life on Everest one year when a French climber lost her way back to camp. Alex had a reputation for looking after others on the mountain, whether it was sharing gear, breaking trail for exhausted teammates, or just stepping in to help someone in trouble. For him, a summit was not as important than the people around him. When Alex returned home, he found the Everest climb had put him in the spotlight, but he wasn't sure he wanted that. Later, he took a job at Black Diamond in California, working as a product testing engineer. He dabbled in avalanche forecasting, and he grabbed every chance he could to train, early morning runs, weekend climbs, anything he could to get something in. But it wasn't enough. He felt caged again. Their second son, Sam, came along in 1993. And around this time, climber Conrad Anker stepped into their lives in a much deeper way. Alex and Conrad had already started climbing together by then, forging a partnership built on trust and shared obsession. They'd sleep on high ledges together, brave storms on Himalayan peaks, and swap gear tips and life stories over camp stoves. When Conrad came to visit the family after Sam's birth, Jenni saw a different kind of presence walk through the door. This tall, blonde, striking guy. Conrad carried himself with a quiet steadiness, contemplative where Alex was restless, soft-spoken where Alex could be boisterous. Conrad actually brought watercolors to base camp, painting sketches of mountains and giving them away to teammates. Alex admired him deeply, once calling Conrad the most selfless person I've ever climbed with. To Alex, Conrad was a kindred spirit, Someone who didn't just chase summits, he understood the soul of the mountains. To Jenni, he was a thoughtful friend, warm with the boys, and respectful of their family life. No one could have known back then how deeply their stories one day would intertwine, or how fragile the balance between love, legacy, and loss would become. Alex's legend wasn't just about summits, it was about style. He embraced the light and fast philosophy. He said the best climber in the world is the one who's having the most fun. And for Alex, fun often meant pushing the line between bold and reckless. One day, with a rare free window, Alex decided to run the entire Grand Traverse of the Tetons. 10 peaks, including the Grand Teton itself, wearing only tennis shoes. Somewhere along the way, he fell and gashed his butt open, and he wrapped the wound with athletic tape, shrugged it off, and kept going. By 4 o'clock, he was back at the office like it was just another casual jog. By 1995, the dream had materialized. The North Face signed Alex and Conrad as salaried athletes, paid to climb full-time, representing the brand on the mountains and around the world. For Alex, it felt like finally being seen. No more scraping by, no more crappy 9-to-5 jobs, no more apologizing for his restlessness. He could support his family, chase the peaks that called to him, and be celebrated for it. But that validation came at a price. With every summit, there was more distance from home. His letters to Jenni carried a subtle guilt, apologies tucked between trip reports, and the creeping question of how long this balance could last. By the mid-1990s, Alex's career had shifted into high gear. He was one of the most recognizable alpinists in the world, traveling constantly, guiding, filming, and chasing first ascents. But the expedition that tugged at him most was one far to the south at the edge of the map. It was Antarctica. He said, "Antarctica has a special sort of tug on my heartstrings. It's the last true wilderness left on the planet." He had only scratched its surface on an earlier expedition, but the experience haunted him. He wanted to return, and he wanted to get to those untouched peaks, the mountains no one had yet climbed. And Conrad was totally on board with it. He'd been there in 1992 and 1994, and the idea of going back to him was irresistible. He had to go back. The problem was timing. The best weather window in Antarctica was at Christmas. And that meant Alex would miss his third son's first holiday at home. Isaac was born in 1997 and had completed their family. Jenni begged Alex to leave earlier or go a different time, but he said he couldn't, that this was the weather window. When the day came to leave, Alex held back tears. He left a bundle of gifts and handwritten notes under the tree for Jenni and the boys. As the family celebrated at home, Alex was thousands of miles away chasing another unclimbed summit on the frozen continent. After Antarctica came Baffin Island, where Alex fell in love with the Inuit people and their resilience in such a harsh land. But that's where he injured his knee badly enough to need surgery. It slowed him down briefly, but not for long, and Alex was soon looking for the next expedition. By the summer of 1998, the strain was becoming harder to ignore. Jenni had 3 boys at home, was busy, and finally told him that she wished that he could stay home. She said that the boys need you now. They're not babies anymore, and I need you too. She wasn't wrong. His schedule had him away for more than half the year. And Jenni had grown fiercely independent in his absence, but she noticed that the boys seemed calmer and more grounded when Alex was at home. They loved Alex's impulsive adventures that they went on, whether it was a backyard campout or a surprise ski day, and he could coax them into homework and chores, something that Jenni was struggling with alone. And when he was home, she didn't feel so stressed. He embraced each of his 3 boys with devotion, but he was never free from that pull of the mountains. Jenni felt abandoned a lot, left to raise the kids alone while he disappeared on expeditions. Sometimes she thought he was unbearably selfish. And sometimes he wished out loud that he were single and free again. And yet, he never missed a birthday or anniversary, even if he was halfway around the world. She loved his passion for life, even if it cost him stability. And Alex deep down did know that he needed to be home more, but he was kind of stuck in that trap of working for North Face and traveling a lot. So they tossed around ideas. Maybe he could go back to math or engineering or computers, get some steady work with only occasional expeditions. But Jenni doubted that it would make him truly happy. Maybe he could get a job as a professional speaker and turn his charisma and his stories into a career. But Alex was unsure about that. Reinventing himself was harder than facing an unclimbed wall of ice. Then came the recognition. In March 1999, Outside magazine put Alex on its cover, calling him the world's best climber. The story, to his relief, wasn't just about summiting and climbing and speed records. It focused on his family life. Alex was proud of that. He told his mother that the greatest accomplishment is to raise happy, self-confident, and kind children. And yet, the balance was never solved. On an expedition to Pakistan later that year, he admitted that it's always a struggle for me to figure out where the balance lies, pursuing my visions and dreams here in the mountains, and making sure my kids know they are really the most important thing in the world. It'll be interesting when they're in their 20s and we can reflect on whether they felt I was fulfilling my obligations to them or not. Alex came home from Pakistan on August 11, 1999. 4 weeks later, he would leave for Tibet. But before that, there was a moment of clarity. He was home for Sam's birthday. Max wanted to climb the Grand Teton with him, and Alex, for him, it was everything that he loved, distilled into a single day: family, mountains, and the joy of climbing. When they reached the top together, he later told Jenni it was the best climb he'd ever done, and it would also be one of his last. Shishipangma was already on the calendar. The final expedition was looming. And the question he'd wrestled with for years about dreams, duty, and how much was too much were about to catch up with him. By the fall of 1999, Alex headed to Tibet to attempt something bold: a ski descent of Shishipangma, the world's 14th highest mountain. At 8,027 meters, or over 26,000 feet, it was the lowest of the 8,000-meter peaks, but that didn't make it easy. Shishipangma had steep flanks of ice and snow that beckoned to ski mountaineers, but those same slopes could turn deadly. There was wind-loaded cornices, hidden crevasses, and massive avalanche risks that meant timing had to be perfect. Few had attempted to ski it, and fewer still had come back with success stories. By Himalayan standards, it was accessible, pretty accessible. You could actually drive to base camp, and the northern route was considered non-technical, but that reputation was misleading. This wasn't some beginner's peak. The air was still razor thin in the death zone. Rescue options were nearly non-existent, and Alex wasn't taking the easy route. He and his team had their eyes on the main summit, followed by a full ski descent down steep, committing terrain. From the beginning, Jenni had a bad feeling about this one. Skiing an 8,000-meter peak pushed the edge of what was possible and survivable. Alex had always loved steep backcountry lines, but after 2 knee surgeries and years of expedition fatigue, this trip felt like too much. Even he seemed unsure. When he got home from Pakistan that summer, he told her that he was already worn out, and she breathed a little easier, thinking that maybe he was going to stay home. But a few weeks later, something shifted. The team was led by Alex's old friend Andrew McLean, and Conrad Anker was on board. North Face was sponsoring them, and a film crew was coming. So momentum kind of took over. Just before he left, though, Jenni had a vivid dream about an avalanche. It rattled her so much she begged Alex not to go. But he brushed it off and said, "You always worry something will happen. It's just a dream. I'm not going to die." He promised the trip didn't mean enough for him to risk anything for her. On September 11th, 1999, Alex left. The goodbyes were routine by then, but this time Jenni was in tears. She begged him again to stay, but he didn't. She told herself to trust Conrad, the steady and careful counterbalance to Alex's impulsive nature. But even before they set foot on the mountain, things started to unravel. Back home, Jenni had found something out from someone else that Alex was planning to tack on another short trip after Shishipangma. It would keep him away from home even longer. He didn't give her any warning. He didn't even talk to her about it. She was furious. When she talked to him next, she confronted him, and Alex ended up venting to Conrad. He said maybe Jenni would be better off without him. Maybe she needed someone who didn't disappear into the mountains for months on end. And Conrad kind of snapped at him, reminding Alex not to be a fool and not to forget what his family meant to him. So Alex scrapped the extra trip. He ended up calling her later and apologizing for the argument and promised his devotion to her and the boys. They forgave each other and even talked about future plans. They wanted to take a trip to Costa Rica in November. Alex had lined up some work there and he couldn't wait to show the boys the jungle. On the mountain, Alex and Conrad grew even closer. Conrad confided his doubts about his own upcoming marriage, and Alex told him to follow his heart and that he'd figure it out. Alex had always chased intensity, but now it felt different. In his journal, he wrote, "I appreciate why I come to the mountains. Not to conquer them, but to immerse myself in their intensity, so much bigger than us. to better understand patience and humanity, to balance the urge to push with the need for a perspective, to share what the hills offer with good friends and one day with my sons. It was a softer reflection than most of his writings. It wasn't about first ascents or photo ops, just a man trying to find balance between passion and responsibility. It started as a calm, sunny morning, the kind of high alpine day that felt deceptively safe. The team lingered over coffee at camp, and Alex suggested a scouting mission. He wanted to look at the ski line that they were going to do. Conrad and filmmaker David Bridges agreed to go, and they left around 8 in the morning. Alex led the way, and then David and Conrad behind him. At 9:10, they stepped onto the glacier beneath Shishipangma's massive south face. Across the valley, Andrew McLean and a few others waved from a distance. Alex smiled and said, "Let's go meet them." 8 minutes later, everything changed. Alex looked up and saw it first, a crack racing across the slope above them. The snowpack was breaking apart. So they ran. Alex and David ran downhill, and Conrad ran across the slope. Shortly after, he looked back again, and they were gone. 30 seconds, and that was all it took. Conrad survived, but barely. He had a fractured skull, broken ribs, bruised lungs, but he clawed his way out of the debris and searched frantically for his friends. He ran back and forth, calling their names for over half an hour, but there was nothing. The avalanche had just been too big, and the burial was too deep, and there was no chance of survival. Back in Montana, Jenni was walking home after dropping the kids off at school when the phone rang. It was Andrew. His voice was cracking as he said there'd been a massive avalanche. Conrad was alive, but Alex and David were gone. Jenni's knees buckled and she collapsed into a chair. She knew what those words meant. Suffocation under an avalanche is almost always immediate. Still, she told them to keep looking, not to give up. Then Conrad's voice came over the line. He was calm and gentle, but said that was it. There was no hope. Max was 10, Sam was 7, and Isaac was 3. Friends dropped by, some managing to bring some levity, briefly cutting through the heaviness of the moment. Jenni leaned on daily calls with her mom and sister, but the silence in the house was unbearable. Conrad called her almost every day. He admitted that it was a really dark time. He was grinding his teeth at night, waking before dawn, and crying himself to sleep. He wrote to Jenni, telling her that he thought of her and the boys constantly, that caring for them gave him purpose, when he couldn't make any sense of why he survived. And that Christmas was really difficult. Conrad came to help cut a tree, and the boys were just buzzing with excitement. He played with them and cheered them on. 7-year-old Sam had asked him quietly, but directly, "Why couldn't you save my dad?" Conrad's voice cracked when he said, "I would have if I could. I loved your daddy. He was my best friend." His words would carry both his grief and his resolve. He wanted to be there for Alex's family in any way that he could. Jenni was just distraught that Alex wouldn't see his children grow up, but she was noticing that Conrad's presence brought joy back into their lives. Conrad's quiet steadiness contrasted with Alex's restless intensity. Conrad had babysat the boys before, and now he was showing up again, being reliable in small ways for them. Jenni began to wonder if her feelings for him were shifting into something more, though guilt and confusion made her hesitate. Was she holding on to Alex or falling for Conrad? Conrad was engaged at the time and living in California, but he was also sinking into a depression. Jenni was having a tough time with it, and she told him that she was feeling too vulnerable, that they needed distance from each other. So he ended his engagement the next day. Later, a Dateline interview brought them back together, and the bond deepened. They kept talking, and the silences became more familiar. And by spring, what started as grief and support turned into something else entirely. They walked hand in hand on a beach. They took the boys to Disneyland and talked openly for the first time about a future. It felt like they were both waking up from hibernation. Max asked if Conrad was going to marry his mom, and they hadn't even talked about it to each other, but both of them had thought about it. Eventually, Conrad moved in, joining the chaos of homework, pets, and noisy dinners. The focus was on the stability for the boys and honesty about their dad. Conrad wasn't trying to replace Alex. He couldn't, but he became part of the rhythm of the house. Friends who knew them best welcomed the change, but there were a few outsiders who whispered about their relationship that it was too fast or wondered if they had started something before the avalanche, but they just ignored it. Inside the house, what mattered was whether the boys felt steadier and whether they could hold things together. Jenni's mother was diagnosed with cancer and passed away not long after. Then Conrad's brother-in-law died. Then Jenni's own sister passed away of cancer. They just had one loss after another. It must have just been brutal to deal with. They were surrounded by reminders of how quickly everything could change. And now it wasn't just sadness that shaped how they moved forward. Every decision carried the weight of knowing that time could be short. Photos of Alex stayed on the walls, and the boys kept asking questions about him, and they got straight answers. Jenni made sure that they knew who their dad had been, not just the climber, but the man who built the pull-up bars in the kitchen, who could turn chores into a game, and who never forgot a birthday. Trips became a way to connect with him. If Alex had loved a place, they went there. It was Jenni's way of helping the boys know their father through the landscapes that he loved. But life with a climber, again, wasn't without conflict. Conrad was still drawn to the mountains. He was still climbing and still pushing himself. Jenni had already lived through the worst outcome once, and she didn't want to face it again. Even small risks sparked anxiety in her. Conrad was also shaped by the avalanche. He had his own sharpened awareness of danger and how fragile life could be. And they argued. Sometimes it got pretty bad, but they also understood each other in a way that only people marked by loss can. Still, the family didn't shrink from adventure. They traveled to the Himalayas and later to Antarctica. Conrad brought that same calm focus to parenting as he did to expedition planning. He encouraged the boys to be curious and join their wild energy. These trips weren't just vacations, they were lessons in resilience, in carrying Alex's spirit forward by living the kind of life he would have wanted for them. Loss made everything sharper. Days felt more urgent, choices more deliberate. There was no illusion that time was unlimited. Together, Jenni and Conrad built a life that carried Alex's memory, but also left space for their own love and the family they were becoming. They were having dinner with Reinhold Messner, the legendary mountaineer, when he said it out loud, a comment, just in passing. He said, "He'll melt out, you know, Alex. Someday he'll come out of the glacier." And the room went quiet. Messner wasn't trying to be cruel, though. He'd lived through it himself. His own brother had disappeared in an avalanche in Pakistan, and years later his body surfaced as the glacier moved. To him, it was just a fact of mountains. That's what happens. But to Jenni, it was pretty hard to hear. Not because she hadn't thought about it. She had. Often, in fact. But hearing it spoken aloud with such certainty made it real in a new way. Alex wasn't just gone. He was there, preserved in ice, buried in movement, and slowly drifting down Shishipangma. She didn't want that day to come, though. Not yet. And not like that. For now, she held on to a different image. Alex, still part of the mountain, part of the wind and snow, still out there. Not returned, but not forgotten. And then, in April 2016, almost 17 years after the avalanche on Shishipangma, climbers who were acclimatizing on the mountain spotted two bodies emerging from the glacier. Encased in blue glacial ice, their remains were preserved with shocking clarity. Their location, gear, and clothing matched what Alex and David were wearing on that 1999 expedition. When the call came, it wasn't a surprise, but it still shattered the silence. Conrad was contacted and immediately recognized the details. For Jenni and the boys, it was a moment they always knew might come, but had quietly hoped wouldn't. And it reopened something they'd all tried to gently close. Max, now an adult, later said the discovery stirred in me all these emotions I had sealed up. I was frozen with him. Sam described it as surreal. He'd been only 7 when Alex died, and much of what he knew about his father came from other people's stories. Now there was a body, and it was jarring. Isaac, the youngest, said that he had lived his whole life with only the idea of a father, never a memory of Alex. Jenni and the boys traveled with Conrad to Tibet to retrieve Alex's remains. At base camp, they held a cremation ceremony. The family circled together and said goodbye in the last place where Alex had been alive. It was painful, but also something else, a bit of a release. There was no more wondering, no more imagined endings. He was no longer somewhere out there. He was here, and they could finally let go. Seeing Alex again didn't erase life that had unfolded since he died. It didn't undo the love Jenni and Conrad had built or the boys growing up, but it closed a loop that had never fully sealed. Max, who later made the documentary Torn about his father and the family finding him, again, you should watch it, it's really good. He reflected that his father had once kind of seemed like an astronaut lost in space, and the recovery changed that image because his father had returned. Sam echoed that it gave him something to hold on to. Isaac said that for him it was less about loss and more about proof. He could stop wondering. He said he was real, and now I've seen that. There was no grand spectacle, no media frenzy, just the family, the snow, the mountain, and a final goodbye. They brought part of Alex home where he could finally rest. And in doing that, something shifted. The glacier had kept him, the glacier gave him back. And in that impossible return, grief softened into memory. Jenni and Conrad ended up going their separate ways in 2024, and their partnership born out of grief had carried them through a hard and necessary season. When it shifted, they honored what they had built and moved forward. Alex Lowe didn't just love adventure, he needed it. And that need shaped every part of his life, the joy, the brilliance, the risk, and the grief that followed. But maybe the point isn't to judge him. Maybe it's just to sit with what it means to burn that brightly, to need the wild so deeply it becomes a part of you, and to understand the people around him loved him anyway. Maybe it's not about whether it was worth it. Maybe it's about understanding what it means to live with that kind of fire inside of you, and what it costs to love someone who has that. Alex was extraordinary and flawed, selfish and generous, brilliant and imperfect. But what he left behind, the legacy, the heartbreak, the story, that's what makes him unforgettable, and that's what makes him human. So that's the story of Alex Lowe. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear your thoughts about his story and, the drive that he had in the comments below. Let me know what you think. It really relates to so many of the stories I cover here, and I'm sure you can see that too, that parallel. Stories like this don't just happen. They take time to research, write, and tell in the way that they deserve. I spent a lot of time, a lot of weeks reading books, researching, digging through archives, watching interviews, just trying to not only understand what happened, but why it mattered. And the goal is always to bring you something deeper than just a rehash of the same old story. So I hope I did that for you today. Let me know what you think about that. If you love the kind of storytelling and want to help support it, come join the crew over on Patreon or right here on YouTube. You can do either, whichever you prefer. Members get early access to videos, ad-free viewing, behind-the-scene updates, and some fun extras from my life here in the Yukon in the cabin, including my 3 sweet senior dogs who are lying around here somewhere. There's 2. Let's see, Lewis, which way do I go? There he is. God, fuck. He was laying the wrong way. Maggie's over on the couch, and the puppy's underneath me. Just waking up. Oh, look at that little boy. Isn't he cute? He has just woken up from his nap. He's got crap. We got crap all over your face. Oh, my goodness. Oh, yes. The little puppy yawns are so cute. And then there's Howler on the floor over there. Well, hello there. Guess what I'm doing again today? Cutting more wood. That is all I do with my life. Got the dogs out here, the old guys. And I'm just so excited. I just cut this big sucker down. It's a big dead tree. All right, here we go. Fresh snow. Ozzy's having a blast running through this with his little short legs. Let's go, guys. Something smells good there. There we go. Oh my gosh, he's so fired up. What's in there? Come on. Hi, you having fun? You're doing a good run. This is a good run for you. You needed to get tired. Let's go. You might want to ride, but maybe not. We'll see. Yeah, he still wants to go. Pick him up. We're not going too far. He just follows Howler everywhere. Oh my gosh. So cute. Shackleton yelled at the men to take down the tents and get the boats ready. Chaos erupted, gear... They bailed non-stop. The Stancomb Wills was filled with sheep din water. Oh, I need coffee. Trying to distract him. He's got a tennis ball. Okay. Oh boy. Do we need to time out? So anyways, you can see more about this guy, how he's fitting in. He's getting restless now. He probably wants to go pee. He was cuddly. Some days he's cuddly. Other days he's crazy. He's just 10 weeks old almost in a couple days. Right? So there we are. Anyways, he can go down. Okay, I saw the puppy. Now I have to go let him out. But anyways, you get to see stuff like that in my videos. So head over onto Patreon. The description is in the link. No, the link is in the description, and you can check it out there. There's different tiers, and I have different perks. You can sign up for whatever fits for you. Free if you want to. There's some free stuff in there as well. And most of all, you'll be helping me keep this channel going. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.